I have the cut is on a side facing away from you at this moment. Let me show you what it looks like. There we go. Yep. Flip it around here and put the trigger in place. And you can see that I've got a little flat spot right there where I want the trigger to be. Somewhere in here. The next thing I'm going to do is to cut this a little bit flatter right here and cut a square portion on the front face of the vertical piece right here. Let me show you what I mean. You can see where that was sitting. Remember now, the trigger was sitting about like this. I'm just going to shave this off a little more. Like that. Now I'm going to shave, so I've got a square edge right here. Now the trigger sits on here about like so. The next thing I need to do is to make it so the trigger will work. So I assemble the various parts. I've got the trigger attached to the diagonal, which is up against attached to yeah, you can see how it hooks up here. Now I need to find out where exactly I want a cut to be on the trigger itself. Now if I hold these two in position like this, I can come behind on the trigger and make a little mark, like so. That little mark is right there. So I'll cut in, and again, I'll cut to that mark. Like so. Now, the first time you assemble this thing, as you're actually making it, all the parts may not work immediately. You probably will have to do a little whittling to make everything come together just so. That's not a big deal. It won't take long. Let's see what we've got here now. We've got the vertical piece, we've got the diagonal piece, and we've got the trigger. And the trigger goes like so. The vertical piece goes like so. And there's your figure 4 trap. That's all there is to it. You see the pressure is down here, is holding all these pieces together. If I want to trigger it, all I have to do is touch the trigger, and it falls apart. Let me show you some more about that. In order to make this a little clearer, I'm going to use some of this charcoal to kind of mark the face of the side that on the vertical piece it's facing the trigger, like so. There we are. Should make it stand out a little better for you. Now, ordinarily what would happen is an animal would push this trigger one side or the other in order to trigger it. And if they hit it hard enough downward, it'll cut loose. But there's a little trick that you don't see in many books. Just underneath where the trigger hooks, I'll let the trigger go, I'm going to carve off that square corner, like so. At this point, there's only one spot where that trigger can hook, right there. Now, if the animal presses down beyond that spot, it'll just release. So if this trap is pushed this way, it releases. If it pushes that way, it comes apart. Or if it pushes down, it'll come apart. Now down is important because I don't like to put bait on these things. I use a thing that's called a treadle, which is something I'm going to show you here in just a couple of minutes. But basically, that is what your figure 4 trap looks like. This is the basic setup of the figure 4 trap. The log is the deadfall. That's what's going to land on the animal and hopefully crush it. The figure 4, as you can see, is down in here. You probably noticed that the vertical piece on the figure 4 is sitting on a rock. That's because the weight of the deadfall tends to push that vertical piece down into the ground. If that happens, then when the thing falls, it may land on the vertical piece and never hit the game. So it's important that you have some sort of a surface, a strong surface there, to carry the weight of the deadfall. You might want to do the same thing at the back end of the deadfall so it will land properly. Now let's test this thing out and see what it does. Here comes our game. I told you this was going to be graphic. Oh, what's this? Oh. Ah! You see? That's all there is to it. Some people have a little trouble figuring out how to set a figure 4 up. I mean, they could build the trap okay, but then actually getting it set underneath that deadfall is a little bit of a trick of its own. Let me show you one of the easy ways to do it. It starts out by grasping the vertical piece and the horizontal piece at the junction between the two. You can see they're already engaged like so. Just grab those two about like this. Pick up your deadfall, place the vertical piece where you want it to be, and set it someplace underneath the vertical piece about like this. Then take your trigger, put it into position about like that, and slowly release the whole thing. And there you are. So it starts out by grasping the horizontal and the vertical, allowing the leverage and the weight and all these other things to settle down, and then just place the trigger in there. Ready? One more little thing. We want you to know that everything you saw in this video was for real. And we also want you to know that the marmots you saw trapped in this video are going to be on our dinner table tonight. Remember the rule. If you kill it, you've got to eat it. But there's another part of the rule that I didn't tell you. If you kill it, you've got to need it. Well, we hope you enjoyed this volume of The Woods Master and that you'll join us in the next one. Meanwhile, we hope you'll join us out here